first case as an assistant district attorney began with my phone call at 3:05 a.m.
Tell us in your own words. Tell us what happened.
I saw him reach. I saw a flash of metal. Gun was with me. I hit him in the head. So I go outside.
Another big guy pulls his badge and he said, "Hey, nobody moves."
You got a right to remain silent as long as you can stay on the peg.
Give me a Q&A on this. There's no statute of limitations on murder.
I'm gonna bury your boy Brennan, but legally I got my proof.
So I break a couple of heads.
I mean, you lose control of this jungle, you're finished.
Well, it gets rough sometimes. If you take shortcuts, they've never hurt us in court.
Just suppose Brennan comes up wrong.
Judges and Jew lawyers and the Kinney DAs are raking it in. You take a freaking hamburger and it's goodbye badge, gun, and pension.
You dirty? You're going dirty.
You can always find somebody to set you out right.
Not if you're clean.
Get out! Get out right now!
Q&A. Nick Nolte, Timothy Hutton, Armand Asante. A film by Sidney Lumet. Q&A.
Yes, welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. Today I'm talking about the film Q&A that was released in 1990. Another Sidney Lumet film. Yes, one that I thought had gotten away from me, and I was really happy to rediscover it just recently on Prime Amazon. That's a pretty good platform for rediscovering some of these movies that haven't been on other streaming platforms, I've found. So 70s and 80s and 90s films that are largely forgotten seem to pop up quite regularly on this platform. I've watched a few of his films recently, and I find that this is one of those late period films he made that sort of gets forgotten about. It gets lost along with the classics that are always quoted, like Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon, Network. Some of the earlier ones like 12 Angry Men. But this one hits hard, and it's pretty brash. It's about all the usual Sidney Lumet themes: power, corruption. What happens when someone tries to stand up to that? It's quite uncomfortable. All right, the trailer hints at what the film's about. It's a New York City film. It starts literally with a police shooting, and Nick Nolte's character, Detective Mike Brennan, brazenly shoots and executes someone outside a club. Now, from the beginning, Brennan isn't framed as an outsider. He is the system. He's been in the system for a long time. He's highly respected as an NYPD detective. He's been shaped by years of street-level policing where legality and survival are constantly blurred. And we see in the early scenes that the other officers really admire and defer to him. He is the old guard when policing was built on instinct, loyalty, and that what happens on the streets needs its own form of justice. Look, the shooting seems to be morally unclear, but as time goes on, it gets murkier and murkier. So what happens? The DA's office is forced to investigate, driven as much by politics as by seeking the truth. It's a box-ticking exercise. And who better to do it than a fresh-faced young assistant DA, Al Riley, played by Timothy Hutton, to go through the motions, get this settled cleanly, and we all move on. So just a procedural, contained, something that's going to resolve in favour of Brennan. That starts to break down almost immediately. Al Riley starts noticing inconsistencies. Some of the testimonies are aligned. The details start to shift. There's some selective memory happening. It's the same old thing that this institution has seen. There's a deeply embedded code of internal protection. Even within the DA's office, Riley seems to have limited support. Apart from the two investigators that are assigned to him initially, anyway, one played by Luis Guzman, a particular favourite of mine. This is one of his earliest roles. He really gives a grounded street level perspective. Anyway, Brennan, he's just out there going about his business. He's confident. He's been through this before. He's not shaken by it. He understands how the system looks after its own. But as Riley keeps digging and digging, this case seems to expand beyond a single incident into something a lot broader. There's a pattern of behaviour here. There's a culture of overwhelming force being used, and the system is not accountable. So other detectives that are connected to Brennan get pulled in. There's some internal department pressure that starts to shape some of the testimonies. Interestingly enough, there's also some street-level figures that are operating between the law and survival, and one of these is Bobby Texador, played by Armand Assante, and this is where things really get interesting. He's a criminal operator. He's tied to the victim, but he's also aware of how leverage actually works in a city's power structure. There's another dynamic here too. Al Riley, Timothy Hutton's character, he's coming off in the not too distant past, there was a bit of breakup with a young woman. He's still trying to process that. Guess who she's with now? She's with Bobby Texador, Armand Assante's character. So that starts to blur his judgment, and his personal life gets mixed up with his working life. We all know that's not a great idea. So the case stops being purely procedural and becomes very personal and very dangerous. The questions that are asked here is who's controlling the narrative, who's going to define the truth, but ultimately who's got the power to make that version of truth stick. Lots of interesting questions are raised. I won't talk about how the film finishes. If you're interested in how this is sounding, you can go and check it out. What's my relationship with this film? I've only seen it twice. I first saw Q&A on video around 91 when I was about 18 or 19. And like many similar films of that period, I was seeing a few movies a week on video, and it was just whatever the new releases were a lot of the time. And I knew about Nick Nolte. He'd already been in a lot of films I'd seen. The main ones being, of course, 48 Hours, but also Down and Out in Beverly Hills, his comeback, and still to come, Cape Fear. But he was having a real career renaissance at that point. So seeing his big mug on the cover, and it looked like a serious, hard-hitting film. So it ticked a few boxes for me. I watched it. I've always remembered this film. Not that it's always been in front of my mind, but whenever Sidney Lumet and references to Q&A have come up, it's always jumped straight in there, and I've got recollections of not necessarily what happened, but I definitely remember Nolte's performance and the tone and the menace he brings to the role, and the bluntness of this film and the rawness, I guess. It really stayed with me. Very uncomfortable watch, especially back then. It seemed to be peeling back the cover on what was going on in real life. It wasn't glossy, and that's what Sidney Lumet does. Once I went back and discovered Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon and even Network, and a lot of his other films, Prince of the City as well. They're all trying to tell it as it is. So look, it made an impact on me, and then it disappeared. I went back to try and find it a few times on streaming platforms. It was never there. I just assumed it was one of the mini films that, for whatever reason, whether it was a rights issue or something, that it just was never going to come up again. I really had given up. Then it showed up again. So my recent mantra is that I just watch it when I see it, because who knows how long it's going to be on the streaming platform. So what stands out now is how well it stands up. It still feels really dense and grounded and quite an uneasy watch. Sidney Lumet, I've talked about him on other occasions. He's one of those filmmakers who always comes back to the same terrain. Institutions under pressure, people under pressure, moral questions, tough questions are being asked. I've already mentioned all the films that he's known for. His last film was Before the Devil Knows You're Dead in 2007. He made that as an 83-year-old. Unbelievable. He's always looking at moral compromises that men are forced to and women are forced to make, loyalty versus truth, and how systems protect themselves by design. And Q&A sits perfectly inside that lineage. If anything, it feels a bit like a later refinement and updating of Serpico, and also very close ties to what I can recall of Prince of the City, which is a film that I haven't been able to find. All right, the actors in this one: Nick Nolte as Mike Brennan. What a powerhouse performance. Whenever people talk about Nick Nolte, they typically talk about the big budget roles that he's known for, or the critically acclaimed ones. So 48 Hours, obviously, with Eddie Murphy at the start of the 80s. And then that early 90s run that he had just after this film with The Prince of Tides, Cape Fear, Lorenzo's Oil. That trio really boosted him up again. And then he fell off again and didn't really regain the steam that he'd built up. So this film came along at an interesting time when I think he was trying to get himself back into shape, and he's brilliant. This role was written for him. He's a huge guy. He's got that intimidation factor already, and you add that to his tone, his raspy voice, which has seen its fair share of whiskey and cigarettes for sure. Perfect. Just his sheer bulk is intimidating, but he physically manhandles Timothy Hutton in this film, and I'm talking actually manhandles him, picks him up, moves him, bumps into him, and the imbalance in their physical makeup is so obvious, and he makes the most of it. It's a great performance. Definitely not a PC performance. Timothy Hutton as Al Riley, he's also perfectly cast because, look, by this stage, by the end of the 90s, he was probably, I don't know, early or mid-30s maybe, but he looks like he's early or mid-20s. He's just got that fresh-faced look. He's always had it, and he always brings a similar dynamic. He's perfect. He looks naive. He looks like someone who's grappling with moral questions. He looks like he's straight-laced and conservative and he's just going to go along. He shows a lot of steel in this film. It's one of his better performances. He'd started the decade off unbelievably with Ordinary People, winning the Oscar straight up, and he was the guy that the Rat Pack, as they were called, looked up to. The Brat. What am I talking about? Rat Pack. The guys that were in The Outsiders, basically. Swayze, Cruise, Estevez. That generation of actor, really, he was a couple of years older than those guys, and they saw what could happen. This was a changing of the guard from the guys in the 70s, and Timothy Hutton knocked that door down. He went straight from Ordinary People in the Taps with Tom Cruise and Sean Penn, another one who greatly respected Tim Hutton. And that was quite a successful film. Falcon and the Snowman, that's another one I recall from the mid-80s, again with Sean Penn. And he went off the boil a bit, but this was a real return to form for Tim Hutton. Amanda Sante as Bobby Texador. I always wondered why this guy didn't have a bigger, better career. He's like, what could I say? He's like a wilder version of Andy Garcia, maybe. He brings that Latin flavor to his roles. He's flamboyant. He's volatile. He's seductive. He's got charisma. In this one, he's perfect for the role. He's aware of how power actually flows. He's street smart, and he's fully fluent in the way the system really works on the street. And he leverages that for everything that it's worth. Brilliant performance from him. Like I said, I don't know why he didn't do more films. He could have popped up in some of the roles in Scarface, for example. He would have been perfect in that. Anyway, not sure. Maybe, hopefully, he just did what he wanted to do. A lot of things worked for me with this one. The realism, like I said, you feel like you're there on the streets in this New York gritty environment. It's the offices even that they filmed in all look real. Doesn't look like sets. Looks like they just somehow found some old police stations and filmed there. Everything feels lived in, and it just adds to the real life, almost documentary feel that this has. Nolte's performance just dominates the whole thing. It gets us through some lulls in the film. His confidence that he's unshakable. You can feel it oozing out of his skin. You can feel the whiskey oozing out of his skin. Tim Hutton, really grounded in the role, anchors the film. We kind of see the action through his eyes and ride the ups and downs through his performance. The dialogue, of course, this is what Sidney Lumet has made his career on. Natural dialogue, feels real, feels sloppy at times, but it could nearly be a stage show. It's back and forth. It really, there are quite a few action scenes, especially in the second half of the film, but it's always the dialogue that's the strongest aspect of Sidney Lumet films, and his direction is pretty restrained for the most part. Second, maybe it's the last third of the film. He kind of loses his way a little bit, so he's not as controlled as usual, to the detriment of the film. But this film wouldn't have happened without his presence, and even if it did, it wouldn't have been as hard hitting and centering on those moral questions as much. So there are a few things that didn't work for this one. Like I said, the final third loses some of the precision that's established earlier in the film, when everything's going along at a good clip and everything's making sense and realistic. The narrative broadens a bit too much, and we get into more conventional thriller territory in the last third. We kind of lose some of the focus, I thought, on what the main issues are, and it becomes more of like a, I don't know, standard Hollywood action film. Some of the developments feel a bit stretched and a bit unrealistic compared to the tightness of the opening parts, and it lost me a bit there, and I was a bit disappointed with the way that the film played out in the end. There's also, look, it's got to be said, as always, there's some elements, particularly around gender differences and homophobic slurs from Nolte's character that are a bit uncomfortable, but it does establish what sort of a monster he's become, sadly, through being in this institution for most of his life. And maybe it's done for effect, but it's also done for realism. So you just got to grit your teeth and get through those in this 2026 environment that we find ourselves in. Even so, even with those flaws, the tension does remain for the most part. So look, it's not a perfect film by any means, but it is still a compelling watch and a strong example of Sidney Lumet's later career focus. It's built on the usual things that he looks for: performance and dialogue and pressure, rather than a twist in the tail at the end so much. Even decades later, it still works as a portrait of what happens when institutions are forced to look at themselves and maybe don't like what they see and struggle to I guess, reconcile that. So look, it's uncomfortable. It is uneven at times, but it's engaging for the most part. And it still returns to Lumet's core question that he keeps on asking us: what happens when the system is asked to account for itself and doesn't want to deal with the answer? And look, in the world we live in now, that's still a question that's coming up a lot. So hopefully you get excited enough to go and check it out for yourself, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, see you next time.